It was June 3, 2023, a soft Paris morning that smelled of rain and roasted coffee. I was sitting by the window of a small café on Rue Saint-Antoine, stirring my cappuccino with one hand and scrolling through my phone with the other. The world outside was ordinary: tourists with maps, couples holding hands, the metallic whisper of bicycles passing by. Nothing could have prepared me for the message that blinked on my screen that morning, 6 short lines that changed everything. The subject line read, "About the wedding." It was from my daughter, Emily. My thumb hovered over the message for a second before opening it. The words appeared like a slap dressed as politeness. "Hey Mom, please don't come to the wedding. It's just complicated. You can watch it through Facebook, lol." I reread it twice, hoping I'd missed something, a joke, an explanation, anything. But that lol at the end wasn't laughter. It was distance. Cold, deliberate distance. The kind that doesn't come from anger, but from shame. The spoon slipped from my fingers and hit the saucer with a sharp clink. People around me turned briefly, then went back to their croissants. I couldn't feel my hands. All I could hear was that lol echoing through my head like a door slamming shut. I had paid for the venue, half of it, to be exact. The Château de Lune, just outside Paris. I'd wired $20,000 from my savings when Emily said her fiancé's parents were tight on funds. I'd helped choose the menu, the music, even the floral arrangements. I knew the exact number of guests, 142. I had lists, emails, spreadsheets. And now I was being told, from 6 time zones away, that my presence was complicated. The waiter asked if I wanted another coffee. I shook my head and whispered, "Non, merci." It was strange, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just hollow. The kind of hollow you feel when love turns into a transaction and you realize you've been overpaying for years. Emily and I hadn't always been distant. When her father left, she was 16. It was just us. We'd built a life out of stubborn closeness, inside jokes, take-out dinners, silent hugs on hard days. I thought those years had meant something permanent. But weddings, I suppose, have a way of rewriting loyalties. Especially when money and pride get mixed in the same glass. I scrolled back through our old messages. The last time she'd said, "I love you," was 9 months ago. The message after that was, "Can you transfer the deposit today?" I finished the coffee that had gone cold. Then I opened my purse to pay, and that's when I saw it, a folded piece of paper tucked behind my wallet. I pulled it out. The top corner showed a pale gold crest, Château de Lune, event venue contract. My name was printed neatly at the top. Contract holder, Margaret Evans. My own handwriting at the bottom, signature of responsible party. I hadn't looked at that contract in months. Back then, it was just paperwork, one of a dozen documents Emily had needed to finalize bookings. She'd said, "Mom, you're good with this kind of stuff. Just sign where they tell you to." So I did. And now, here it was, warm from my hands, smelling faintly of perfume and ink. Something about it made me pause. The details blurred before my eyes, but one sentence stood out: the contracting party retains all rights to modifications or cancellations. A sentence I hadn't noticed before. I folded the paper slowly, like it was something fragile, and slipped it back into my purse. The idea that flickered in the back of my mind wasn't revenge, not then. It was something quieter, something like self-respect stretching after a long sleep. I left the cafe and started walking toward the Seine. My reflection followed me in the shop windows, a woman in her late 50s, hair pinned up, eyes tired but sharp. I'd been invisible for a while, I realized. To my daughter, to her world, maybe even to myself. By the time I reached Pont Marie, the air had turned crisp. Street musicians were playing La Vie en Rose. I leaned on the bridge rail, watching boats drift by. Each one carried strangers who might have mistaken me for another tourist. I smiled at that. Because tourists don't carry contracts in their handbags that could change the course of someone's big day. That night, I stayed in my small rental apartment near the Latin Quarter. I reread Emily's email one last time. Every word felt sharper now, like it had been written with intent. Don't come. Watch through Facebook. The cruelty wasn't just exclusion, it was the suggestion that I should settle for a screen. I closed my laptop and looked at the folder on the nightstand. Inside it, the contract waited, silent, legal, binding. A reminder that even when people forget your worth, paperwork remembers. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept replaying the moments that led here. Emily's laughter when I said I'd help with costs. The gratitude in her voice when I transferred the funds. The silence after. I thought about her father, too, how he'd walked out on us with a simple note, "This isn't the life I want." I'd spent years making sure Emily never felt abandoned. And yet here I was, on the receiving end of the same note, written in a digital font. Around 2 a.m., I got up and turned on the lamp. The light hit the edge of the contract, and the paper glowed like something alive. My eyes fell again on the fine print, "All final decisions and permissions rest with the contracting party." A laugh escaped me, soft, disbelieving, but real. I opened my email and began searching my inbox for Chateau de Lune. Dozens of threads popped up, confirmations, invoices, receipts. Every single one listed me as the client. Not Emily. Me. A new kind of calm settled in. Not the kind that forgives, but the kind that understands power when it reappears. I didn't reply to Emily's email. I didn't write back a single word. I just archived it and closed my laptop. The next morning, I went back to the cafe, sat in the same chair, and ordered a new cappuccino. The waiter recognized me and smiled. I smiled back. I took out the contract, smoothed it flat on the table, and signed my initials again at the bottom, not to change anything yet, just to feel what authority felt like in ink. The cafe was full of quiet chatter, cups clinking, spoons stirring, the soft music of decisions being made. As I folded the paper and slid it into a clean envelope, a strange peace washed over me. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew this: she'd told me to watch from afar. And I would, though maybe not the way she imagined. I finished my coffee, left a tip, and stepped out into the Paris sun. The streets shimmered. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. And in my purse, the envelope rustled again, a small, silent reminder that sometimes, the things we sign in love can become the tools of justice when love forgets its manners. I looked up at the sky and whispered to myself, "All right then. Let's see how this plays out." That's when I finally smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't come from happiness, but from knowing you're not as powerless as they think. The following week, the sky over Paris turned gray, and so did my mood. I stopped checking social media. I didn't scroll through wedding updates or look at the posts of Emily's friends. Silence became my ally. People assume revenge starts with anger. It doesn't. It starts with quiet. The kind of quiet that listens, observes, and remembers. I went back to my life as though nothing had happened. I read the newspaper at the cafe, walked through the park, answered work emails, and smiled at the neighbors. From the outside, I was calm. Inside, I was a storm with perfect manners. Emily didn't call. Not once. But her absence gave me time to think. I printed every document linked to the wedding, invoices, wire transfers, screenshots of messages, even WhatsApp confirmations. They filled a binder with blue dividers, each labeled venue, catering, florist, music. The pages smelled faintly of ink and self-respect. I didn't know what I was building, but I knew I needed it organized. Maybe it was protection. Maybe closure. Maybe both. One afternoon, Helen, my neighbor from back home, called. She was a retired notary, sharp as ever, always ready with legal anecdotes. "So, did the big Paris wedding happen yet?" she asked, her voice chirpy and innocent. I hesitated before answering. "Not yet," I said. "Soon." Then, before I could stop myself, I added, I won't be there. Silence stretched. You? She finally said. But you paid for half of it. I told her about the email, every line, every word, even the LOL. When I finished, she sighed so deeply it crackled through the speaker. My dear, she said, you hold the contract, don't you? I told her yes. Then don't underestimate paper, she said. People forget kindness. Paper doesn't. That line stayed with me for days. That night, I pulled out the contract again. I ran my fingers across the embossed logo of the chateau. It was heavier than normal paper, the kind that feels official even before you read the words. Each clause was written in polite legal French, but the meaning was simple: I had the power to authorize or deny access. I was, in every practical sense, the owner of that day. Still, I didn't feel triumphant. Just conflicted. Emily was my daughter. My only child. There was a part of me that wanted to forgive, to believe that maybe her message had been written under stress or pressure from someone else. I replayed her voice in my mind, the way she sounded when she was little, asking for bedtime stories, the way she'd giggle when I'd mispronounce French words. Could that same child have turned into someone who would publicly exclude her mother? Maybe. Maybe not. Days turned into a rhythm. I'd wake, make tea, and pretend I didn't think about her. But I did. Every hour. Every minute. The difference was, I'd stopped crying. Instead, I began to notice small clues. Signs of how people saw me now. Mutual acquaintances stopped texting. Her fiancé's mother posted vague quotes about moving on from negativity. A cousin sent me a message, I heard you're not attending, is that true? I replied simply, that's correct. The fewer words I used, the stronger they felt. Silence was turning into something sharper, discipline. One afternoon, I sat across from Helen on a video call. She had her glasses on, her eyes magnified and kind. If I were you, she said, I'd make sure every document is in your possession before the wedding. Even a digital copy can make a difference. She paused, then added, and if they still plan to use your payments, ensure you get the receipts reissued in your name. Something clicked. I opened my email right there. The venue confirmation, my name. The florist invoice, my payment method. The catering advance, my bank transfer. Every financial trail led back to me. Emily hadn't even changed the billing details when she took over the planning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed with a cup of tea, watching the Eiffel Tower blink in the distance. My mind replayed her email again. Don't come. Watch on Facebook. The irony stung, she'd given me permission to watch, but not to belong. It wasn't about the wedding anymore. It was about what she thought I was worth. I opened my laptop and started a new folder on the desktop, Wedding, Legal. Inside it, I stored scanned versions of every contract, receipt, and message. I labeled each file by date. When I was done, the screen looked like a gallery of quiet evidence. I didn't know yet what I'd do with it, but I felt something shifting, power returning, piece by piece. The next morning, I visited the bank. I told the teller I needed printed statements showing every transfer related to event expenses. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and printed them out. As she slid the stack across the counter, I felt something strange, not anger, not vengeance. Certainty. On the walk back, I stopped at a bookstore. There was a display near the entrance, Know Your Rights, Contracts and Obligations in France. I bought a copy. That evening, I read for hours, underlining sections with a pencil. The law was surprisingly poetic when stripped of jargon. It was about fairness, accountability, acknowledgement, all the things I'd lost with Emily. Halfway through the week, I received an automated reminder from the venue, final confirmation pending from the contracting party. I froze. It was the same phrase I'd seen before, but now it sounded different, like a question only I could answer. I clicked reply and began typing, then stopped. I wasn't ready. Not yet. My mind was at war. Part of me wanted to confirm the booking for Emily's sake, to protect her from embarrassment. Another part wanted her to face what she'd done, to understand that kindness has limits. I saved the draft and closed the laptop. That evening, I went for a walk along the Seine. The air was cool, the water silver under the bridge lights. I thought about Emily's future, how she'd remember this moment years from now. Would she see it as cruelty if I acted? Or as consequence? Somewhere deep down, I wanted her to grow, even if that growth came with pain. When I got back to the apartment, there was a letter waiting in the mailbox. The return address was Chateau de Lune. Inside, a short note. Dear Mrs. Evans, we kindly request final approval and signature for the upcoming July event. Please note, access to the property requires consent from the contracting party. Warm regards. M. Duval, Event Manager. My hands trembled as I read it. That single paragraph carried more weight than any apology I could have ever written. I placed the letter on my desk beside the folder. The lamp light made the gold crest shimmer faintly. Then, something small but important happened. I smiled. Not out of joy, but recognition. Life had given me a tool, and this time, I wasn't going to waste it. Still, the guilt came. Late at night, I'd wake up wondering if I was becoming the same as those who'd hurt me. Maybe revenge wasn't justice. Maybe it was just a mirror. But then I'd think of the email again, of how easily she'd erased me from her own story. And I'd realize this wasn't revenge. It was correction. The next morning, I gathered all the documents into a clean leather folder and tied it with a ribbon. Not for drama, for order. I wanted everything ready, in case my heart wavered again. Before leaving for the cafe, I paused by the window and whispered to myself, "You're not doing this out of hate. You're doing it out of memory." Outside, the city moved at its usual pace, buses, chatter, a street violinist playing faintly in the distance. I walked calmly, the folder tucked under my arm. It felt like carrying my past, but this time, on my own terms. I didn't call Emily that day. I didn't reply to the venue yet. I just sat in silence, sipping coffee, the folder beside me. Every so often, I'd touch the edge of the paper and remind myself that silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's just the sound of power gathering breath. And that night, when I closed my eyes, I knew one thing for certain, the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I woke up earlier than usual that morning, sunlight spilling across the curtains like a quiet dare. The city felt slower, heavier, or maybe it was just me, carrying the weight of decisions I hadn't yet made. The folder sat on the table beside my coffee mug, neatly tied with the same ribbon. It almost looked ceremonial, as if it contained more than just paper, as if it held something invisible and alive, my dignity. I took a deep breath, untied it, and began reading every clause again, this time with sharper eyes. The first call I made was to the chateau. A polite French voice answered, "Bonjour, Chateau de Lune, how may I help you?" I introduced myself as the contracting party. There was a pause, then the tone shifted, instantly more formal. "Ah, Madame Evans, of course. How may we assist?" I could hear faint typing in the background. I asked for Monsieur Duval, the manager. He came on the line a few minutes later, cheerful, professional. "Madame Evans, a pleasure. Everything is in order for the event next month." I smiled slightly. "Actually," I said, "there's something I'd like to discuss. A small amendment." He hesitated. "Amendment?" "Yes," I continued, my voice calm but deliberate. Clause 12, regarding access to the premises. I'd like to ensure that all entry and usage permissions are limited exclusively to the contracting party or by her written consent. There was silence on the line, then the sound of paper shuffling. Duval cleared his throat. "That is indeed within your right, madam. Would you like me to send the updated form?" "Yes." Email is fine. When the message arrived minutes later, I opened it carefully. The revised document looked the same, except for one added line: access to the premises, including setup and event entry, requires written authorization from the contracting party. My name, printed again at the top, seemed to glow faintly under the lamp. I hesitated before signing. This was the moment that would tip everything. My pen hovered above the paper. Was I truly prepared for what this would mean? If I followed through, the wedding could crumble. But if I didn't, what lesson would be left for her? She had humiliated me, treated me like an afterthought. Maybe life was giving me one last chance to remind her who I was before she forgot completely. I signed. One clean stroke of blue ink. Simple, final, irreversible. After scanning and sending the document back, I closed the laptop and stared at the empty screen. A strange calm settled over me, not relief, not satisfaction. Something quieter, steadier. The kind of calm that comes when a storm decides its direction. Over the next few days, I made other moves, quiet ones, invisible to anyone watching. I called the florist and confirmed that all receipts and payment acknowledgments should remain under my name. I verified with the catering service that any refund, in the case of cancellation, would revert to the payer's account, mine. Each conversation was polite, professional, even friendly. No anger, no theatrics. Just logistics. That's the beauty of bureaucracy, it works best for those who understand its rhythm. I even drafted an email to my lawyer back home, a man named Colin I'd worked with for years during my small business days. I told him the situation in plain terms, no emotion, no embellishment. Just tell me, I wrote, if a contract like this can be legally cancelled by the signatory before the event date, and if any penalty applies. He replied within an hour. Margaret, yes, you can. You're the only legal holder of that agreement. As long as you provide written notice within the timeline listed, 14 days before the event, the venue must comply and issue a refund. It's airtight. If they question it, refer to subsection 4b. But I doubt they will. 14 days. I looked at the calendar. There were 17 left. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the lights of the city flicker awake. Below me, people were laughing, cars honking, music drifting up from somewhere near the river. Paris was alive, indifferent to my small personal war. I envied that. Then, halfway through the glass, my phone buzzed, a text from Emily. The first one in weeks. Hey Mom, hope you're okay. Just wanted to say thanks again for helping us with the venue. It's going to be perfect. We arrive next week. No apology. No invitation. Just polite acknowledgement, like a customer thanking a bank teller. My hand tightened around the glass. For a second, I almost replied with something kind. But then I remembered the email, that cold, LOL. I set the phone down and said nothing. The next morning, I woke with a clear head. I decided to visit the chateau in person. The train ride through the countryside was quiet and beautiful, golden fields, distant villages, sunlight spilling over everything like forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. When I arrived, the estate stood as majestic as ever, limestone walls, sprawling gardens, a view of the river that seemed carved out of a postcard. Monsieur Duval greeted me warmly, offering coffee. It will be a lovely ceremony, he said. We are honored to host your family. I smiled faintly. It is beautiful, I said, looking around. But sometimes, beauty hides poor behavior. He tilted his head, not understanding. I handed him a copy of the revised clause. Please make sure this is implemented strictly. Of course, madam, he said, nodding quickly. Only with your written consent. As I left, a strange satisfaction followed me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was meticulous. There's a difference. Anger wants to destroy. Precision wants to correct. Back in the city, I started preparing the cancellation notice, just in case. I typed it carefully, leaving the date blank. It read, Dear Monsieur Duval, as contracting party for the July 15th event, I hereby cancel all services effective immediately. Please issue refund as per clause 14b to the original payer account. I printed it, folded it neatly, and placed it in an envelope marked for delivery if necessary. It sat on my desk, silent and patient. But not everything was smooth. One evening, I got another message, this time from one of Emily's friends. Can't wait to see you at the wedding, Mrs. Evans. You must be so proud. My chest tightened. She had no idea. No one did. I typed back, plans have changed, and left it at that. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept picturing Emily in her white dress, laughing with her friends, taking photos. I wanted to be angry, but part of me still saw the child who used to braid my hair when I was sick. Was I crossing a line? Was this justice or cruelty? Around midnight, I stood up and paced. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, calm, but unreadable. I whispered to it, if she had simply asked me not to come, I'd have understood. But mocking me? Turning kindness into pity? That deserves memory. The next morning, I sent one final email, to Duval again. Please confirm that no access will be granted on event day without my explicit written approval. I will provide final instruction closer to the date. He replied within the hour. Confirmed, madam. Your authorization will be required at gate entry. Best regards, Duval. It was done. The framework was complete. All that was left now was time. Over the next few days, Emily posted on social media about wedding prep, photos of dresses, decorations, her fiancé carrying boxes. Every post had hundreds of likes, and every caption dripped with excitement. Can't wait to say, I do, at the dreamiest venue in France, she wrote. I didn't comment. I didn't like. I simply watched. And yet, beneath the calm, there was doubt. Late one evening, I almost deleted everything, the emails, the copies, the cancellation notice. I even picked up the envelope, ready to tear it apart. But then I saw her new post, a selfie captioned, Can't believe mom won't be there. Guess some people can't handle not being the center of attention. The paper slipped from my hands, but I didn't cry. I just whispered, all right then. I placed the envelope back in the drawer and looked at the clock. 2 weeks left. I would wait until the right moment. Sometimes, silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. The morning of July 15th arrived with the kind of sunlight that felt too beautiful for what was about to happen. I woke before dawn, not because I had to, but because sleep had abandoned me somewhere around 3 a.m. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the muffled city beyond the glass. I sat at the table, staring at the envelope that had been waiting for this day, for delivery if necessary. I poured myself a cup of coffee and watched the steam rise, twisting like thought. My hands were steady now. No shaking, no hesitation. The waiting had burned the uncertainty out of me. I looked at the clock, 7:05 a.m. In Paris, the chateau staff would already be setting tables, arranging flowers, ironing tablecloths. Somewhere in that flurry, my daughter would be getting her makeup done, laughing, sipping champagne, never suspecting that her Facebook invitation had a clause attached to it. I took a deep breath, reached for my phone, and opened the folder of scanned contracts one last time. Everything was in order, invoices, payments, proof of ownership. All the evidence that love, when taken for granted, can still have signatures attached to it. I typed a short email to Monsieur Duval. Dear Monsieur Duval, please consider this written notice of cancellation for the event scheduled for today. As per Clause 12 and Section 14b, I request a full refund to my account. Access to the property should remain restricted. Best regards. Margaret Evans. I hesitated for only a second before pressing send. The whoosh of the email flying off into cyberspace sounded final, like the closing of a courtroom door. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I had done it. And just like that, the silence in the room changed shape. It wasn't heavy anymore, it was clean, like air after a storm. At 9:10 a.m., my phone buzzed. An email from Duval. Madam Evans. We acknowledge receipt of your cancellation request. The event has been placed on immediate hold pending verification. Please confirm your arrival if further discussion is required on site. Respectfully. M. Duval. That was all it took. The gears of the machine were already turning. I dressed deliberately, pale blue blouse, black slacks, low heels. Simple. Respectful. I tied my hair back, slipped the original contract into my bag, and took the train toward the countryside. The world outside the window blurred into green streaks and gold sunlight. I could feel my heartbeat, steady and measured, as if reminding me that calm is also a kind of strength. When the taxi dropped me at the chateau gates, I saw them immediately, guests arriving in suits and gowns, photographers unpacking cameras, white doves in small cages by the fountain. Everything looked like a movie set waiting for its cue. But the staff at the front gate weren't smiling. They were on their phones, gesturing anxiously. I walked up to the guard, who looked relieved when I gave my name. Madam Evans, thank goodness, he said in accented English. There is confusion. I nodded. I can imagine. He escorted me through the side path toward the main hall. From a distance, I saw the chaos unfold, the bride in white arguing with a man in a gray vest, her fiancé pacing, the wedding planner looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The guests milled about in confusion, murmuring, glancing at their watches. When Emily saw me, her face went pale. She froze mid-sentence, disbelief etched into every line of her expression. Mom, she whispered, as if saying my name might undo what she was seeing. What are you doing here? I didn't answer right away. I walked up to the manager, who was clutching a clipboard like a shield. Monsieur Duval, I said evenly, I trust you received my email. He nodded nervously. Oui, madam. Everything is on hold until you authorize continuation. We cannot proceed otherwise. Emily blinked, stepping closer. Authorize? What's happening? Duval hesitated, looking from her to me. Madam Evans is the contracting party, mademoiselle. Legally, we cannot host the event without her consent. Her lips parted. The air seemed to vanish between us. You cancelled it? I did, I said quietly. This morning. Gasps rippled through the small crowd nearby. Someone dropped a bouquet, the sound of flowers hitting stone was louder than it should have been. Mom, you can't do this, she said, voice trembling. People are here, the press. I held up the envelope, calm as marble. You told me not to come, Emily. I'm only following your wishes. Her fiancé stepped forward, red-faced. You're ruining everything. No, I said. I just stopped paying for it. Duval cleared his throat, uneasy. Madam, shall we proceed with the cancellation protocol? Yes, please. I handed him the signed notice. Emily lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Why would you do this? You're my mother. Am I? I asked softly. Because for months, I've been treated like your credit card, not your parent. She flinched, tears filling her eyes. I was under pressure. We just wanted things perfect. And they were, I interrupted, my voice steady. Until you decided perfection meant pretending I didn't exist. The crowd was silent now. Only the distant sound of birds filled the air. Duval, trying to keep professional composure, said, as per our terms, refunds will be processed to Madam Evans within 30 business days. We will need guests to vacate the premises. Emily's makeup had begun to run. She turned toward her fiancé, desperate. Say something. He raised his hands helplessly. I didn't know she had that power. You told me everything was in your name. She looked at me then, truly looked at me, and for a moment, the defiance drained away. She looked like the teenager who used to curl up on my couch after heartbreaks. The same eyes, but filled with something else now, realization. I just wanted you to be proud of me, she whispered. I said quietly. Until you decided I wasn't good enough for your guests. She covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. The photographer lowered his camera. No one moved. Even the staff seemed frozen by the weight of what they were witnessing. Finally, I turned to Duval. Please make sure the vendors are paid for their efforts. The rest can be refunded. He nodded, grateful for the instruction. Of course, madam. I started to walk away, the sound of my heels echoing against the marble floor. Behind me, I heard Emily sob, the kind of sob that comes from pride breaking in half. At the door, I paused and turned back once more. For what it's worth, I said gently, I hope someday you'll understand this wasn't about money. It was about manners. And then I left. Outside, the sunlight felt different, softer, freer. I stood by the gates for a moment, looking back at the chateau. Workers were already dismantling tables. The guests were leaving, murmuring awkwardly. The fairy tale image was dissolving into reality, one flower petal at a time. As I waited for the taxi, my phone buzzed again. Another email from Duval. Confirmation, event cancelled. Refund process initiated. Thank you for your prompt communication, Madam Evans. I read it, then deleted it. Some things don't need to be kept. The taxi driver, an older man with kind eyes, opened the door for me. Big wedding, huh? He said, smiling. Not anymore, I replied softly. He chuckled, not understanding the weight of my words, and started the car. As we drove away, I looked out the window and saw Emily standing at the entrance, her dress catching the wind like a flag of surrender. My chest ached, but not with regret. It was something closer to release, the slow, painful exhale of years of being taken for granted. As Paris reappeared on the horizon, I whispered to myself, she'll remember this day. Not for what she lost, but for what she learned. Then I closed my eyes and let the city swallow the noise behind me. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet, like the air after a thunderstorm that has uprooted everything yet left the sky clean. I returned to my apartment, unpacked my suitcase, and placed the leather folder, the one that had started it all, on the highest shelf of the bookcase. For days, I didn't touch it. I just walked past it, pretending it was a piece of history that belonged to someone else. But every now and then, I'd glance at it, remembering how one signature could alter the course of so many lives. Paris moved on as it always did. The cafes were still full, lovers still quarreled under the bridges, and strangers still smiled at me as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Maybe nothing had, at least to the world. But inside me, something had shifted. The noise in my mind was gone. For the first time in years, my thoughts didn't orbit around my daughter, her approval, or her plans. My life had expanded again, quietly, privately, and without apology. The first email from Emily arrived 10 days after the wedding that wasn't. No subject line. Just 3 words, can we talk? I didn't reply right away. I stared at the screen for a long time, hearing the echoes of her voice from that day, shock, anger, disbelief. I remembered the way her eyes had looked when she finally realized what she'd done, how pride can sometimes turn love into arrogance. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear her excuses. Not yet. So I closed the laptop and went for a walk. The park near my apartment was blooming with late summer flowers. Children chased pigeons, a man played accordion near the benches, and life looked mercifully simple again. I sat down and watched the clouds drift past the cathedral spires. I thought about forgiveness, how people talk about it as if it's a single moment, a choice you can tick off like a box. But forgiveness, I realized, is quieter and slower than that. It's not about forgetting what someone did, it's about not letting it define you anymore. 2 days later, she called. I almost didn't pick up, but the sound of her name flashing across the screen made my heart twist. When I answered, there was a pause, long enough for me to hear her breathing on the other end. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was smaller than I remembered. The last time I'd heard it, she'd been shouting in a marble hall. Now it trembled. "Hello, Emily." Another pause. Then she exhaled, shakily. "I don't know what to say." "You could start with the truth," I said gently. "I was angry," she said. "Angry at you, angry at myself. I thought you were judging me, trying to control everything. I wanted to feel independent, like I didn't need you to make things happen. And when I sent that email, God, I didn't even mean it the way it sounded. It was supposed to be a joke." I closed my eyes, listening. "A joke that cost you your wedding?" She didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice almost broken, she whispered, "I deserved it." We both stayed quiet for a long time. I could hear faint street noises through her phone, traffic, laughter, maybe wind. "Mom, I lost more than money," she said finally. "I lost people's respect." The photos went viral, everyone talking about how the wedding got cancelled at the last minute. But what hurt most wasn't the embarrassment. It was realizing you were right there, and I'd made you feel unwanted. Her words landed softly, but they still cut through me. I wanted to say something comforting, but I also wanted her to sit with it, to understand that love without gratitude is just entitlement dressed up nicely. "I didn't want to ruin your life, Emily," I said quietly. "I just wanted you to remember who built parts of it with you. Every favor, every payment, every sleepless night, those weren't transactions. They were love. And love deserves a seat at the table, not a live stream link." She began to cry softly. "I know, Mom. I know. I've been thinking about everything you've done for me. I was so busy trying to look grown up that I forgot who raised me." We spoke for nearly an hour. No screaming, no blame, just slow, fragile honesty. By the time we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace that didn't depend on her reaction. I didn't need her apology to heal. The act of reclaiming my boundaries had already done that. That evening, I took the contract down from the shelf. I opened it carefully, tracing the creases, the ink, the faint coffee stain near the corner. I didn't feel anger anymore. Only gratitude, for what it had taught me. For years, I'd believed that love meant saying yes, no matter how much it cost. But love, I'd learned, also requires knowing when to say no with grace. The next morning, I went to the bank and confirmed that the refund had arrived. I stood at the counter, looking at the balance. $40,000. I smiled faintly, then withdrew $500 in cash and asked the teller to convert it into small bills. From there, I walked to a nearby community center. It was a modest place, a haven for single mothers and displaced families trying to rebuild. I met the director, a kind woman named Clara, who recognized me from around the neighborhood. "I'd like to make a small donation," I said. She thanked me, eyes lighting up. "Would you like it to go toward a specific cause?" "Education," I said after a moment. "Something that helps women start again." When I left, I felt lighter. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented, a transformation. Something bitter had been recycled into something kind. Justice without cruelty. Closure without revenge. That night, as I prepared dinner, there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there she was, my daughter, standing in the hallway with red eyes and a hesitant smile. She looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of the arrogance that had once filled every room she entered. "I was in town," she said softly. "Can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her gaze drifting over the familiar furniture, the photos, the little details she'd grown up with. "It feels strange being here," she admitted. "Like I left home a long time ago and forgot how it smelled." I smiled. Homes don't hold grudges. They just wait. She sat at the table, fidgeting with her hands. After a while, she said, I don't know how to thank you. For what you did, and for not hating me. I poured her some tea, the same blend we used to share when she was a child. You don't need to thank me, Emily. Just learn from it. That's enough. She nodded, tears forming again. I have. More than you think. We talked for hours, about small things, big things, things that had no tidy resolution but finally had room to breathe. She told me she'd ended the engagement. Not because of the scandal, but because she'd realized she was marrying someone who valued appearances more than substance. He told me the wedding falling apart was your fault, she said, but deep down, I knew it was mine. I built it on ego, not love. I reached across the table and took her hand. Then maybe it's time you build something new, on truth this time. She smiled faintly. I think I will. When she left that night, she hugged me longer than she had in years. I stood at the doorway watching her walk down the street, her figure dissolving into the soft amber light. After she was gone, I tidied the table and placed the contract inside a frame. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. It hung on the wall above my desk, next to a photograph of Emily at age 6, grinning with ice cream on her face. The two images together made sense in a strange way, innocence and consequence side by side. As I turned off the lights, I whispered to myself, paperwork speaks louder than pride. The words felt less like a lesson and more like a truth carved by time. I didn't know what the future held for us. Maybe we'd grow close again, maybe not. But I knew this much, I had reclaimed my peace, and she had found her humility. That was enough for both of us. The next morning, the city woke up golden, and I walked out with a new calm in my steps. The world hadn't changed, but I had.